Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with Russian-born New York City jazz bassist Yuriy Galkin. He talked about his 2019 CD, For Its Beauty Alone, a reflection on our uncertain and unjust times when an absolute power causes suffering to many. So he's from Russia. He also lived in the UK for 7 years, performing and recording with world-renowned musicians like David Binney, Matt Mitchell, Jason Palmer, and so many others. In February 2010, he became the winner of the prestigious Dankworth Composition Prize for his tune Evolvent, written and arranged for a 9-piece orchestra. From September 2013 till October 2014, he was appointed a professor at one of the most prestigious music academies in Russia. In 2015, he launched a new project that involved his most prominent musicians on the New York jazz scene. He's full of stories, full of history, so get to know him and dig this interview, my friends.
Thank you for taking a minute out for Neon Jazz, man. I appreciate it.
Oh, no, I appreciate you doing this interview. Yeah,
absolutely. You bet. So let's dive into your latest album, For Its Beauty Alone, which is kind of a reflection of these uncertain, unjust times that we're living in with all of these power struggles and things happening. Talk to me a little bit about this project and what you wanted to get across with your music.
Like you said, I want a reflection of our time and, well, let's say the issues we're facing right now in the world. You know, coming from certain places, from certain people, and at the same time, we're still able to find something, deep in ourselves, to create something beautiful and to live our lives and to not forget what this is all about. That's the whole point of it. And you can see it from the titles that it goes back and forth, between different phases. Like it starts with a title tune, which appears 3 times on this album, For Its Beauty Alone, and it ends with this tune as well. So the point is, we start with beauty, we start with love, and we go through these different phases of revival and further eruptions. We're going back to this beauty and love again, and at the same time it reflects, like the Cradle song basically reflects, a child who's in his or her cradle and, hearing a lullaby and not aware at all of what's going on, around him or her. And at the end of the album, we're going back to the beauty, to love, and one might be able to hear that the title tune that appears in the album 3 times, like I already said, it has 3 different endings. So the first ending's at the very beginning, and it has a French name. It ends on the perfect 5th, which is neither major or minor, so you can't really tell what this is about. It's just an opening, right? And when it appears in the middle of the album, it ends in some kind of uncertainty, right? And at the very end, when I want to emphasize that, at the end we all come back to peace, beauty, and love, I put a major chord there. So to summarize it all, that's what it is.
Wonderful. So based on, kind of the mode of this album and just kind of what you've obviously seen a lot growing up in Russia. Talk to me a little bit about what your childhood was like and how you got into jazz.
Oh, that's a long story. Right. I was born just at the beginning of 1990s, and as you imagine, when I was like 8, 10, or whatever, was a time when the Soviet Union collapsed, and that's that's when we went through, started going through all this uncertainty. And those were weird times. And I should say, I wasn't exposed to jazz from early age, because jazz was somewhat of I wouldn't say prohibited in Russia, but the majority of people didn't know what it was. Although my parents were, they still are, professional musicians. They graduated from conservatoire as classical musicians. But to be honest with you, they didn't know, and then they knew, obviously, as you understand, everything about, Rachmaninoff, Tchaikovsky, and everyone else out there. But they kind of learned from me about Miles and Coltrane and everyone else by the time I was in my late teens. So they had no idea who those people were. I exposed myself to jazz. I've heard some music played by Russian jazz musicians back in the day. It was mostly those, older generation. And I was fascinated by it. And there was a guy in my hometown who was famous for, he knew some jazz, he could play some jazz, he was a violinist. I made a goal to get in touch with him, and I befriended him, and we became friends, and we started to play jazz. But before that, since my parents were professional musicians, I was exposed to all these mostly classical music from early age, and I listened to some rock music, which my father had in his collection, such as the Beatles, Pink Floyd, some other music. I was classically trained pianist for like 6 years, I believe, and I played all this classical repertoire. And then I stopped, probably got bored with it, something like that, and picked up electric bass pretty much by accident, because it was available at some, institution. And I took it home and started to make progress. So that's how it started. And very soon I realized, I started to pick up tunes like rock tunes and, stuff like that, stuff that I heard. And quickly I realized that I needed something more, to expand my boundaries, and got fascinated by jazz music. So before that, I didn't know who all these jazz bass players were, like, obviously Jaco Pastorius and just everyone else. I couldn't really imagine that you could play this instrument in that way, and that's where it started.
You move on from Russia and you go to the UK. That had to be a big kind of culture change and a big leap for you to get to a point where you finally made your way to America.
Yes. Well, before that, I should say, since I was living during those times of, huge uncertainty, like 1990s, it was a crazy time for Russia. And I believe for many other countries too, but I think especially for Russia. My parents didn't really want me to become a musician, for obvious reasons, financial and et cetera. And I did masters in aeronautical engineering. So, but I never gave up my passion for music. As a consequence, the last year of my aeronautical, engineering university and the first year of the Russian Academy of Music, I was doing at the same time, 2 of them. And after 2 years at the Russian Academy, I got, I just got fed up a bit with, and by the way, there was, I got enrolled into the music academy in 2003, and I started to search for for something new, basically, and I decided to try myself somewhere else, and I got enrolled at the Royal Academy of Music with a full scholarship. I played an audition there, and I got enrolled. And in 2005, I moved to the United Kingdom, where I stayed for 7 years. I didn't regret a bit because the London scene, the United Kingdom scene was a lot more vibrant, a lot more alive, and that's where I started my project, non-ed project, 9-piece band, and I toured with this project. That's the story.
So did you always have a dream that you were going to come to America and play jazz?
Pretty much, yes. Yeah, I believe for the past 10 or so years, maybe a little more, I was dreaming about coming to America, to New York City, because that's where all this music was coming from, that I was fascinated by, and in the end, I made it.
So yeah. In the beginning, when you did get here to America, were you was it like a big dream come true? Were you nervous playing in New York, or did it just seem natural?
I think I was mature enough and old enough to understand what I'm doing, and I was also certain about what I'm about to do, what I want to do. So that's a very important thing, to know what you want to do, where you want to pursue, and because you have to, we all know you have to have a goal, what music you want to play, what kind of people, musicians you want to be associated with, and stuff like that. So I just knew when I was developing this, let's say, identity for a good number of years, and I'm going to tell you that it has been also my dream to make an album with David Binney for a good number of years, maybe about 8 or 10 years, because I loved his sound, I loved his approach, and the music for this album was written, with his sound in mind.
At this point right now, after all of the, you came from Russia, you went to the UK, you came back, now you're in America, you've won awards, you're well established in New York. Are you happy with your career right now?
Yes. Again, my goal here was to establish myself as a band leader, because, I have something to say with my music. I wanted to do this album, and I probably would like to get involved more as a sideman, although, I understand that, this will just come, as time goes by. My main focus is to develop myself as a leader of my own project, although I'm very much fascinated with collaboration with other interesting musicians.
Early on in your life, what jazz show did you see? One of the first jazz shows you ever saw that really stuck with you and you loved?
I don't think I've seen much of the American shows played by American musicians until a little later on. I've seen a few Russian jazz musicians back in Russia, obviously. But also, as a matter of fact, I had quite a big collection of concerts on VHS. So, yeah, that was, I think that was the main source of jazz for me back in the day, back in, let's say, end of 1990s. And I've started to listen to the shows live when I actually moved to the United Kingdom in 2005 because I played and befriended some people, some musicians at the Ronnie Scott's Jazz Club, and they were, as you know, they are still hosting a lot of American players as well as everyone else. So, and I could come to see every concert for free, you know, and I took this opportunity, and I think I just seen everyone, you know, who came down there.
Everyone has a perception or a version of who they think you are, your family, your friends, your fans, your students, but you know who you are best. Just tell me, who do you think you are?
And I think that's the best part, because, you know what, because we don't know who we are. Well, that's a good point to realize. We should always be in search of who we are, and we will never know till the very end. You know, we're going to discover more and more about ourselves, but that's a process of self-discovery. You know,
sure.
I think that's my point. I wouldn't say I have much of a Russian personality. At the same time, I guess you can't say I'm English or American or wherever else. I think that's the whole point.
Absolutely. That's a great answer. I like that. Hey, Yuriy, thank you for taking some time out for Neon Jazz to talk about the latest album, your life in music, time here in America. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to yet another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players in Russia, New York City, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Yuriy for his time, his music, and his stories. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino on the iTunes Store. Visit neonjazz at youtube.com, and for everything Neon Jazz, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.